Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
Everyone injured all at once was kind of the theme for Saturday, or perhaps, Joe, more injuries than points scored.
Between the injuries, the absolutely horrifically woeful offensive performance, and everything else that occurred, with the exception of some of the play of the defense, what happened on Saturday at Mountain America Stadium was a game that Sun Devil fans will not soon forget for all the wrong reasons. They say it's darkest before the dawn, and I'm sure that anyone who cares about the maroon and gold is hoping that sun's going to come up real soon, because this of the lows that have been felt over the last year or so, or even 2 years, if you're dating back to the start of the whole NCAA investigation matter, that kind of felt like the lowest point. And I know that the lows can continue to even get lower. I get that, but something about being in that stadium and seeing the product on the field was something different than anything I've seen in nearly 30 years watching this team. I've been kind of racking my brain thinking if that's the worst game that I've seen in person at Mountain America Stadium, and it's possibly. There are some other candidates, but needless to say, it was a concerning sight, to say the least. Some changes are necessary, and some changes have already been made.
Yeah, we'll dive into some of the steps that are being taken for the Sun Devil offense to end its 6 quarters and counting scoreless streak. Now, of course, we have to say that injuries are a big part of that. We'll dive into that here in just a couple moments, but it's a real rough time. That was one of the most bewildering games that I've covered. 8 turnovers by the offense, just kind of really uninspired play. The play calling left a lot to be desired. Just the complete kind of just a potpourri, just a terrible cocktail of just futility on the offensive side of the ball. Everything that could go wrong kind of did. But this is a new week. They have a new opportunity, although it's going to be very, very daunting challenge with the number 5 USC Trojans coming to town. So we're going to talk about all that. We're going to break down Saturday's game, go behind Trojan lines with Ryan Young of Trojansports.com to get his expertise on what the Trojans are going to be bringing in, along with the Heisman Trophy winner. We're also going to be talking to tight end Bryce Pierre and running back Kyson Brown, 2 guys who've had to kind of step up in the recently, given some of the injuries at their position groups, and going to be some perhaps key pieces moving forward.
And before we jump into other news items, a huge shout out and thank you to Jones Auto Group, which has been serving the state of Arizona and the Sun Devil community for more than 50 years with multiple locations across the state of Arizona. As you already know, they're as strong as it gets when it comes to supporting Sun Devil athletics through their NIL efforts that they have done pretty much since the whole NIL thing came into the equation. 4 players on this year's roster driving around with some sweet rides, courtesy Jones Auto Group. Your support of Jones Auto helps them be involved with ASU athletics in the ways that they are. The Sun Devil community truly is treated like family by Jones Auto Group. If you're concerned about credit issues or any other matters that might stand in your way from driving the vehicle of your dreams, don't worry about that. Get with Parker Jones. I'll give you his information here in a second. He will outline every possible game plan to put together a winning solution just for you. And if you want to find out about how you can possibly save on tax dollars that you'd otherwise spend, check out Jones Auto Group. They have some unique advantages they can break down for you. So you want to get with a fellow Sun Devil when you're making a big decision like this. No better guy than our guy, Parker Jones. Not just the owner and GM, but a 3rd-generation Arizona State alum, and just like you, a diehard Sun Devil fan. So here is his number. Write it down. Put it in your phone for when that moment comes that you're looking for a new ride. Make him be your first call or your first text. 602-881-8998. Again, 602-881-8998. That's right for Parker Jones. So you can get in contact with him, talk about the vehicle of your dreams. And you can check out their inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles at jonesautocenters.com. Jones Auto Group, Arizona's best since 1970.
Joe, the football front is kind of bleak at the moment, coming off that 2019 or 29-0 loss, and real uphill battle against USC coming up. But Joe, we got to celebrate a big win. ASU, for the 9th straight year, has won the innovation title. I think it was a U.S. News and World Report. I really have no idea what that means, but obviously every Sun Devil celebrates the hell out of that. To celebrate that and to mark that occasion, they Sun Devils had an all-time kind of bag fumbling moment in terms of just read the room, fellas.
Yeah. The innovation championships, that's cool. Still to this day, I have absolutely no idea what that means.
None
And I'm
whatsoever.
wondering, are they just kind of playing by themselves in this innovation game? That's why they keep winning it. I don't know. I mean, I'll give them credit. Credit's due. I think that there are other schools or entities.
They keep naming Harvard and
people-
MIT in it, so maybe it's
Does
best of
Harvard
three.
and MIT know that they're competing or not? I don't know. So, but hey, if you're winning, you're winning. But yeah, and Brad, I think you have the terminology, and it sucks to like split hairs like this, but yeah. The caption that was used on the tweet from ASU about it after such a debacle on the football field this past weekend, and all the things that have happened not only in the past few weeks but the past 1 to 2 years, yeah, it was not a good look.
So this is a tweet from the ASU official account at ASU, and it's actually pinned for your convenience. So this one kind of caught the ire of pretty much the entirety of Sun Devil Twitter. As a result, it reads, ASU, repeatedly ranked #1 in areas that matter, has landed at the top of another list again. And it goes on to say they beat MIT, Stanford for the 9th year. That coming like 48 or 40 hours ish after, as we talked about, probably the low point of Sun Devil football in decades. Whew, not great.
The areas that matter thing. So that is interesting, because are you saying that athletics don't matter? Because that certainly is not the truth when it comes to a major college institution. So
check out Colorado's applications numbers.
Yeah. So yeah, not a great look. Kind of when it rains, it pours. Been an interesting, Twitter week between Herm Edwards deciding to start tweeting for the first time in 2 or 3 years, and just, being as tone deaf as humanly possible. But what do you expect? And this. So yeah, Sun Devil fans have probably been jumping in the replies of quite a few people over the last week or so.
All right, so moving on to actual football a little bit. Cal, the first road game on ASU schedule. ASU be heading up there next weekend after to face them on the 30th. Heading to the Bay, a noon kickoff, so it'll be some day football. Perhaps it's best that it's on the Pac-12 network, limit the viewership of those two offenses going at it.
I don't mind it, kind of get that game going. I'm not going to say get it over with, but I love me some daytime football, and
Weather's going to be great.
Yeah, nice weather. Those are things that are generally positive. So hopefully there are some incremental improvements this week. To predict a win would be overwhelmingly optimistic, that I don't think anybody who's watching this football team is thinking about. But getting up to Cal, that should be an opportunity as good as any that ASU has had, or honestly may have the remainder of the season, to get a W.
Yeah, I picked that as a game that ASU would win in our preseason roundtable. You know what? I still right now think that ASU is going to win that game. We'll see. We'll break down. Things can happen. All right, so let's dive into injuries and the laundry list, and some good news, Joe. Some good news as of as we record this on Tuesday after Tuesday's practice. But so this is just kind of a list of the guys that ASU had to play without heading into the Fresno State game. Presumed offensive line starter Ben Coleman, we've known that he might be back later in the year. Right tackle starter Emmett Boley is out for the year. Left tackle Isaiah Glass missed the game as well. Top guard reserve Cade Briggs missed that game. Defensive tackle Anthony Cooper missed his 3rd straight game. Of course, Jaden Rashada missed the game. Jalen Conyers, ASU star tight end, out. Running back to Carlos Brooks had been a very key piece of this offense, is kind of with his work as a running back, also as a fullback and blocker as well. And here are the guys who left the game with injury against the Bulldogs. And of course, most notably, quarterback Trenton Bourget, who got the start in place of Rashada. He left with a left lower leg ankle type injury. Edge rusher Clayton Smith, a key piece of that defense, he left the game early with another lower leg issue. Quarterback Drew Pine left the game, opening the door for ASU's 4th-string quarterback Jacob Conover to finish that game. Right guard Joey Ramos left, but was able to return to practice. Right tackle Max Ihanachor, who is starting in place of the injured Emmett Boley. Tight end Bryce Pierre, wide receiver Melquan Stovall, and running back Tevin White, all left for the Fresno State game. I mean, the offensive execution, we'll talk about that in a moment, and the play calling, all certainly left a lot to be desired, but that is a lot of key players.
I've never heard a list like that between the two ends of it, as far as the limitations that you had entering the game and then what you lost during the game, just making a bad situation all that much worse. So Yes, the execution was horrible. The mistakes just added up one after the next. But that said, you can't expect a lot when you have those sort of injuries. I mean, even if ASU were to have been able to compete at a higher level or turn the ball over, I don't know, maybe even like a half dozen times as opposed to 8, something realistic. Those injuries still probably would have been a difference maker. Again, I'm not trying to excuse that abomination on the football field that we saw on Saturday, but man, this team was just playing from behind from the get-go.
Yeah, so some good news though. Let's flip the script. Let's be a little positive because I was out there on Tuesday for ASU's first open practice of the week, and there was some good news. Tight end Jalen Conyers, Joe, he's back. That's going to be a big weapon. ASU needs some guys who can move the chains, get in the end zone. Jalen Conyers is certainly a guy who can do that. Some guys that left during the game. Joy Ramos is back. Bryce Pierre's back. You'll hear from him here in later on in the show. Melquan Stovall, Tevin White, Drew Pine is back as well. He and Jacob Conover we're rotating at the for the team practice or team session in practice. So we'll see ultimately who gets the nod there. And this is probably some good news for a Sun Devil defense that, of course, as we mentioned, maybe going to be without Clayton Smith for a little bit. Defensive tackle Anthony Cooper, who has not played in any of the games this year and has really kind of been out for going back into fall camp. He's out there. He was running with the one, so that's a nice boost for the interior of the Sun Devil D-line.
Yeah, it's good to get some of these players back. And you talked about the quarterbacks, and if Drew Pine is your QB1, you want to see him bounce back. That, again, probably has to be the worst game of football he's ever played in his life, I would imagine. That was the polar opposite of the first impression I'm sure he wanted to make as a Sun Devil, with the turnovers and other matters that just rendered the offense completely useless. So yes, good to get Conyers back, although you've got to be pleasantly surprised, or maybe not even surprised, because there was some hype with Bryce Pierre, but he contributed on offense last week, showed what he can do a little bit. So you want to get these bodies back, because obviously you have these like two competing concepts that both need to be rectified between the coaching, play calling, execution stuff, and just the personnel having bodies on the field. Like, you're trying to get both those to sync up at the same time. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but at least you're making some positive trends with some people medically, even though the tally still doesn't really work in your favor because of the guys that have been lost.
Yeah, Kenny said after the game that when he was asking kind of that final drive of the game, ASU was maybe going to get a chance to just kind of, avoid the shutout, but ASU kind of called off the Dogs midway through that drive. He was asked what that was behind that decision. He said that, at that point he had another offensive line injury. I think Joey Ramos got rolled up a little bit on that drive, and he called off the Dogs because he said that we were one O-line injury away from just kind of not being able to practice. They already had to make some adjustments in terms of how they practice today, in terms of just like the limited number of kind of the big bodies they have there. So he did give a update after practice on Tuesday. Trenton Bourget and Clayton Smith are deemed doubtful. Some other additions. George Hart was another addition to the injury report. Didn't see him get injured, but he was not there. He's been listed out on the depth chart as injured. Johanna Chor and DeCarlos Brooks look like they're going to be missing some time as well. Cade Briggs, he seems to be questionable per Kenny. That would be a nice boost for the depth of the offensive line. One observation that is probably worth discussing, kind of given the fact of the continued offensive line shuffling. Today, we saw Joey Ramos kick out to right tackle with Aaron Frost, who still coming back from that knee injury. And really, we talked about him being a guy that could contribute and be a big boost to this offensive line heading into the season. Just it doesn't seem to be healthy as of yet. Getting some reps at right guard as well. There's a couple of different combinations, but that one kind of really jumped out to me in terms of running with the ones. Sean Naa, the newcomer, seeing some action at right tackle. We finished the game at right tackle after Johanna Chor left. Also listed now on this week's depth chart as the number 2 left tackle behind Bram Walden with Isaiah Glass out. So it'll be interesting to see, if Frost if he's thrown in there now, maybe he's a little healthier, if he can be a little bit of a boost for that Sun Devils, the Sun Devil line in the trenches.
Yeah, and that's kind of where you are right now with the availability issues. You've got true freshmen that they're possibly getting red shirts pulled. Obviously, that got to be grateful for that 4-game rule, and that's something where you could still maintain that eligibility. Players I'm not saying they're being rushed back from injury, but a circumstance like this might kind of intrigue a coach to do that a little bit more than others, or walk-ons, or things like that, or just different schematic things or elements in practice. I mean, this is what happens when you really have to scramble for things, and that's like we talked about pretty much every week. The one area of the team that you didn't want to see injuries happen is the offensive line, and where have the most injuries been? I mean, to a level that this is almost rare to see this many linemen go down over the course of an entire season.
Yeah,
let
like
alone
a week 10 or 11
within
body
the
count.
first month of the season. So just insult to injury, or I guess injury to insult, more technically speaking.
Yeah, and so of course perhaps the biggest headline on the injury front is that Kenny Dillingham did say that quarterback Jaden Rashada will miss 4 to 6 weeks with an injury, and so that seems like the door will be open, and that perhaps they will aim to get him some game action, but also preserve that red shirt because he has played in 2 games, of course, and so he would have the ability to play in 2 more upon his return later on in the year, and still have all 4 years of eligibility left. On the quarterback front, just kind of with the depth concerns as they are right now with Rashada and Bourguet doubtful. Hunter Herrera, the walk-on, he's the 5th quarterback on the roster, had a number change kind of as a result. He's probably looking like he might be the number 3 for Saturday. He had worn number 7. Melquan Stovall, of the wide receiver, of course, number 7. So in the chance that Herrera is pressed into duty, he's changed to number 18. But Joe, let's talk about the play calling. We talked about the injuries, and that only gets you so far. Some curious coaching decisions and play calling on Saturday that really kind of factored into the inability for the Sun Devils to score any points whatsoever. So one of the key guys that has kind of been under fire for the last probably couple of weeks, offensive coordinator Bo Baldwin, and he's been the guy calling the plays so far for the Sun Devils this season. And perhaps you say the first game, all right, you had the weather delay, it's the FCS opponent, you don't want to show your cards too much, but the last 2 weeks, and especially no points over 6 quarters, that ain't going to get it done. Kenny said that he's going to fix it, and he was kind of vague after the game in terms of what that means, but after practice on Tuesday, he kind of showed his hand there that he's now going to take over play calling duties. So here's what he had to say on that front.
I think offensively, we need a little bit of a boost, so I'm going to do whatever I think can help us get a little bit of boost of energy out here. And, so today I was a little bit more involved in offense than I have been, just to try to, get us going and get us out of a little bit of a rut we're in.
Will that apply for the game as well?
Yeah, I mean, probably, just because I'm just trying to get us into a little bit of a rhythm. I don't know exactly how it's going to play out, to be honest. It's just one of those deals where I'm just trying to get our guys into a rhythm, and me as the head coach, whenever I'm more involved in the side of the ball, they're going to feel a sense of urgency. So I'm just trying to get more involved in that side of the ball this week to try to feel that sense of urgency to try to get us something sparked.
And I think this is the right move to make. I mean, you've got to shake things up. It's not a season where there's nothing to lose, like that concept. And I've even said it, but I think after last week, you got to take that back, because there are things to lose when you see a game performance that is unlike anything that we've seen in decades. Might as well throw out those superlatives, because we haven't really talked about them quite yet. I don't know what the opposite, because superlative, I think, kind of implies positivity. This is not that. Spoiler alert. This is the bad side of it. So just to kind of put into perspective what you saw there last Saturday. So it's the first shutout ASU has suffered since 2008, the first shutout at home since 1988. I consider myself a longtime follower of Sun Devil athletics, as are you. So this is the first time I've ever seen ASU get shut out in its home stadium in my time following the program. And again, it's been about 30 years or so. Fourth largest margin of defeat in any shutout loss in the last 70 years. Fourth largest overall margin defeat at home since 1996, rather. The 11th highest margin of defeat in any game ASU's played since 1996. So when you see it's the first time in 35 years or only the fourth time in 70 years, that requires change. I don't agree with the fans who are already giving up on Kenny Dillingham. I don't understand what was expected out of this season. I get, yes, this is frustrating and this is below what was expected, but by the way people are saying stuff, whether it's social media, message boards, you get the impression that they thought this was going to be like an 8, 9, 10 win team, and that should never have been the expectation. So circling that all back around to what we're talking about here with the play calling duties, you need to shake it up. You saw that with Sean Aguano last year, and that helped in little increments. You got a win out of it. You got some improvement on offense. So we'll see what this truly breaks down, because again, you don't want to be an alarmist right now, but if you're looking at this coaching staff and thinking about the long-term future of Arizona State and its hopes of getting back into mediocrity, sadly, you got to hope for that as an improvement. The offensive performance and play calling needs to improve dramatically, whether that's Bo Baldwin back in that role down the road, whether that's Kenny Dillingham for the remainder of the season, whether there are different changes as time goes on. You need to reinvent the wheel here.
Yeah, it's going to be the same offense, and as Kenny said, it's kind of the same plays, same play sheet, but with a new guy, kind of, he's talking about bringing in new set of eyes, new energy, kind of this, because the offense certainly needs it. Now, it's kind of, unfortunate that he's not going to be playing kind of with a full arsenal and, with whether it's Pine or Conover, but it's a change that absolutely needed to happen. We go back to, and we'll talk about this in our review segment, but just like the inability to score, at the first and goal at the 3, and you're still in a game, in a situation where you're still in the game, and perhaps you can swing the momentum back your way. But we've seen just 6 straight quarters of failing to score a point is unacceptable at this level, any level of college football. And so, especially when you have as much offensive talent as the Sun Devils have in terms of the playmakers at running back, receiver, even down the depth chart at tight end as well. Just absolutely no excuse for the performance that we've seen. So it'll be interesting to see exactly, going to a pretty talented USC defense, but there are some vulnerabilities there. What kind of game plan Kenny and the staff cook up?
Nobody is happy after that game on Saturday, but if you want to make yourself happy, treat yourself. Swing on by Burrito Express. Of course, a family-owned business that began in 1995 with a combination of authentic recipes, competitive prices, and a comfortable atmosphere. It all makes dining with Burrito Express a unique experience. You've seen their passion on Twitter. You've seen how incredibly active they all are over at Burrito Express in terms of supporting Sun Devil student athletes with a multitude of awesome NIL deals. So it's safe to say by now, if you're a part of the Sun Devil family, which all of you I'm sure are, Burrito Express is a business well worth your support. And of course, the food is top notch all the way. You cannot miss, no matter what you pick on the menu. Burrito Express has 6 Valley locations, 2 in Gilbert, 1 in Mesa, 1 in Chandler, 1 in Scottsdale, and the Tempe location near Rural and University, just about a half mile from Mountain America Stadium. They're open at 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday, with some locations open as early as 6 a.m. during the week. And they're also open 8 to 3 on Saturdays and Sundays. You can order online at theburritoexpress.com for pickup or delivery. Be sure to give them a follow on Twitter and Instagram at BurritoEXP and on TikTok at BurritoExpressAZ.
All right. ASU lost 29-0 at home to a group of 5 team, a quality group of 5 team. But as we talked about, this is an opportunity for the Sun Devil offense to get going against the defense that had just given up over 30 points to an FCS program. And ASU just put on probably the worst offensive display I've seen in my time covering the team and even just watching the team. We'll go over the numbers here in a second, but just overall, just abysmal. The injuries really kind of decimated the offense and prevented them from doing a lot of stuff. The coaching staff and the play calling prevented them from doing a lot of stuff, and the execution of the guys out there left a lot to be desired. Just everything that could possibly kind of go wrong for one side of the ball on during a game, it really happened to Sun Devil offense on Saturday.
I mean, we've seen some bad games. There have been some rough years, some rough times, but this was something different. It is like kind of the tale of 2 sides, because the defense did just about as well as you could have expected them to in the circumstances. It certainly was not a perfect game. I mean, they had their share of errors for sure, but they kept ASU in this game for a little bit into 3 quarters and helped it be a 29-0 loss instead of what easily could have been like a 38, 42, 45-0 Fresno State victory. But the ineptitude on offense, it just, I mean, my goodness, it looked like a 7th grade team out there against the Super Bowl champion. I mean, it was shocking. Even now, a few days later, it's so difficult to put it into words because it didn't even seem real. Like I said, we've seen bad games, but I don't know. I haven't seen an 8 turnover, 0 point game. Obviously, if you turn the ball over 8 times, scoring is going to be few and far between. But the hits just kept coming, and when you thought there might be some opportunities, there were play calling issues, or they're just these back-breaking turnovers. It just was such a horrifying combination of things on offense that just left you stunned, and hoping that it's an aberration, hoping that it's the low point that they can bounce back from, hoping that it's the negative experience that can be used as the team's own bulletin board material to say, we're never doing that again. And we're going to find some way to make it better, even if that's incrementally, because obviously it can't get much worse. But that was just, it was a sad and somber experience, really. I mean, the stadium was dead within a couple possessions of the first quarter. I think it feels like the fans kind of have this short-term hope of, okay, hey, like if ASU maybe scores on the first drive, gets 7-0 lead, gets, 3 and out, get the ball back. Cool. Things are going. I feel like there's like just this small little sense of hope. And then that was obviously crushed, and then further crushed, and then continually crushed. And then you get your hopes up a little bit because the defense plays, and you get some sacks, and you hold for some field goal opportunities or missed field goals. What were there, 7 attempts over the course of the game?
Yeah.
However you slice it, it was bad. It was really, really, really bad. And the injuries don't help. And this is not a personal shot at any players on the team or coaches or anything like that. But I mean, you have to call it what it is. And I go back in my head, it's either that or that New Mexico State game from 1999 is the worst ASU football games, the most painful ASU football games I've ever seen in my entire life with my eyes in that stadium.
Now, of course, we knew ASU was going to be pretty shorthanded going into the game with Jaden Rashada out, and that's kind of something that we saw in practice. But of course, team policies can't report on injuries, so we kind of knew that they're going to be shorthanded a little bit. And Trenton Bourguet was going to get the start, and Kenny Dillingham said that he was going to play 2 quarterbacks heading into Saturday's game, and he has since walked that back and said that was a mistake on his part. He's never a fan of a 2 quarterback system. He feels that sometimes when he outline that it can either have the quarterbacks press too much or be too conservative in terms of trying to hold on to that spot. And so we saw kind of right off the bat, Fresno State, after they had an opening drive touchdown, that Trenton Bourguet threw a pick early on, and then unfortunately went down with an injury. Drew Pine comes in on a 3rd down and long, and I believe another a missed block. He got blindsided, fumbled the ball for another turnover. But overall, I mean, the hits just kept coming for ASU. 8 turnovers on the night. That's the most since ASU had 7 against Oregon in 2010. 8 was bad, but apparently in 1973 they had 10 against Utah.
And that was a really good ASU team in 73. So I guess that's some good company to be with. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they got all the turnovers out of the way, out of the system now. Conference play will be nice and clean. So overall, just the ASU had 3 quarterbacks play on Saturday night. Trenton, of course, his limited time, 6 of 8, 47 yards, and that pick. But Drew Pine, not the debut that we saw. We saw spring practice Drew Pine, and a guy that was kind of not comfortable out there, thinking too much, got in his head, 2 picks, 2 fumbles, but he ultimately got another injury. Kenny said it was on the same leg as his hamstring injury, but not the same injury. Jacob Conover came in, a guy who had really not got any reps in fall camp because he, as the kind of number 4 guy in that quarterback race, didn't get a whole lot of team session up until really kind of some sparse duty after Pine got injured at Camp Tonizona. Kind of acquitted himself the best he could, had some good throws, 6 of 16, 89 yards, 2 picks. Not a great sign when your 5th string quarterback, in this case Hunter Herrera, didn't dress for the game, was on the sidelines and just kind of wearing the jersey and such, had to go get dressed mid-game because he was 1 hit away from being pressed into duty as well. But just the turnovers, there was some another fumble Tevin White had on the play that knocked him out from the game as well, behind an offensive line that had been decimated. Just really, really just kind of disappointing to see overall, just because you expected better, but then with the injuries, the offensive line, it was just kind of the perfect mix for a really sad night.
I mean, think back to that really forgettable 2016 season, and I remember, ASU made a point, and it's a valid point about like how many starts were missed or something.
Yeah.
Like they had some data that they threw out, and that like seems like you'd laugh at that right now, like, or you'd beg for that to actually be the case right now. Yeah, it is. If it's not unprecedented, it certainly is rare to lose this amount of people and just the multitude of people at key positions. It's not like it's, the same guy keeps going down and getting healthy and goes back down again or something like that. But heading into the game, even with the news about Rashada needing to miss some time, I mean, I was still optimistic, and I'm not going to say like more so, but I had full faith. Hey, Trenton Bourguet is a guy that can come in and run this offense. Drew Pine, he's someone that very likely would have been the starting quarterback at the beginning of the year had he not gotten hurt. So yeah, there was reason for optimism again against a Fresno State team that had let up 30+ points in each of its first 2 games, most recently to an FCS opponent. There were logical reasons to think that this might be a good opportunity for ASU to possibly win, but at least for the offense to get off the ground. So all of that adding up to the 0 points scored by Arizona State just make it one of the most shocking games in recent history. And it goes up there, even though the opponent is significantly better, it does go up there with the UNLV 2008, with the New Mexico State 99 that I mentioned before, and even with the Eastern Michigan from last year. It's on that short list of just those games that you leave the stadium or you turn your TV off and you're saying, what in the world did I just see? It's like you're playing a video game and you have it on like the hardest setting and you're just getting smashed every which way. So again, there was a lot of things happened. The vast majority of them were bad, with the exception of things on defense. So right now, ASU's at a pivotal point, again, in a season where the outcome cannot be anything great, but trying to salvage things, because as bad as that 3-win season was last year, if you're being very realistic as a Sun Devil fan right now and looking at the schedule, you have a hard time getting to 3 wins this year without turning some major things around.
Yeah, so we'll see if perhaps the play caller change, just like it did last year, kind of reinvigorates an offense, and getting some of these guys back off the injured list could help, because you go back to that 1st and goal situation where Drew Pine kind of had some good throws, had a nice 24-yard connection to Elijah Badger to get things going, and you have 1st and 3 or 1st and goal at the Fresno State 3-yard line, and just it was Cam Scattaboo had a run, got stuck or gained a yard. George Hart on a fullback dive, because he was in place of DeCarlos Brooks, who was injured and had played fullback and had success in those short yardage. 2 Hart runs, didn't get anywhere. Then a play action pass. It just, everything kind of just was coming up in a bad way. So we'll see perhaps if, having some of these guys getting the Jalen Conyers back, you figure he might be a viable red zone target as well.
Now going back to that possession, because that was like in a nutshell, that was the game in a nutshell.
They were down. It was still a 2-score game at the time in the 2nd quarter.
Yeah, and you had an opportunity. You figure you can even go for 2. Like you could have made it a 1-score game.
And they were getting the ball to come out of the second half too.
Yeah, like it made a lot of perfect sense. But it was so predictable. The people I was talking to, I'm like, watch, they're going to go for a 4th down, which I suggest, but they're going to just get tricky, get cute. They're going to roll the quarterback out. It's a very predictable play, and that was the outcome. And then the thing that was like, man, just the icing on the crap sundae. The first play that Fresno State ran, which is a normal thing to do, what'd they do? A sneak. What'd they get? A few yards on it. Like, hey, Arizona State, here's how you do this. You sneak the ball, you get a few yards, you buy some space. Or if ASU would have been able to do that on any of the 4 plays it ran, it would have had a touchdown. Like that, to me, again, it's not like it's a slap in the face or anything like that, but it's just, yeah, see, if ASU would have done that one simple thing on any of the 4 plays that it ran from the 3-yard line, whatever it was, you'd have had a touchdown. Would that have won the game? Certainly not, but could it have thrown the momentum in a different direction and made at least more competitive? I think so.
Yeah, so a lot of questions. So again, we will see if the change in play caller, mentality, energy, better results in terms of the injuries, getting Conyers and company back could help a little bit. Well, we will see, but we should say, as bad as the offense was, the defense for the Sun Devils deserves a tip of the cap. They hung in there. You might say, giving up 29 points in a game not great, but actually I thought it was another winning effort by the Sun Devil defense. They were really good. The offense gave them obviously not even like no help, but like actively fought against them. Kenny said after the game that if we had punted on every possession, that would have resulted in a better outcome. That's probably the biggest damnation that you can give to your own offense.
It was ASU's offense and Fresno State's offense versus ASU's defense. Like it was like a handicap match. And on the punting, Josh Carlson had one punt and it looked pretty dang good. So maybe there's another thing that we can take from it. Hopefully,
the discipline. I mean, again, a low penalty game, so some things. So it looks like that penalty and that coming out after the weather break in the opener, perhaps the aberration as we're getting more data points. But again, the defense really good. When your offense turns it over 8 times and you give up just 15 points on those 8 possessions, and when your back's going to be in against the wall most of the night, that's pretty damn good. The defense continues to be just really impressive. I mean, I'm not going to say put it up in like a 2013 or 96 category. It's not a perfect defense. They got burned for a 42-yard touchdown a little bit later on against your presumed top corner, but still, you did enough to win. They did enough to win against Oklahoma State. Obviously, did enough to win in the opener. I think the pass rush is continuing to kind of round into form, even with Clayton Smith going down. Prince Dorba takes that spot, 2 sacks. He's now the team leader after 3 weeks. 3.5 of the 6 sacks, Joe, were by defensive backs. So Brian Ward is living up to that chaos master, bringing pressure and different blitz looks and scheme looks through, from all levels of this defense.
Fresno State attempted 7 field goals, right?
Yeah, made 5.
I don't know that I've ever seen a kicker attempt 7 field goals. I think back to that Cal game in 2016 that came at the end of 2015. No. Yes, 15. At the end of the season after the U of A game when Zane Gonzalez had like 6 field goals in a super winnable game.
This one, the one that was like trading touchdowns for field goals.
Yeah.
The lead just continually shrunk by 4.
Because Devin Lucien had like over 100 yards receiving at the half, and Mike Norvell, as he tended to do, just went away from the thing that was working. But that's a completely different story. Yeah, that is wild stuff. The defense for ASU has made the progress that you certainly would love to see the offense make. The first game was decent, but you had some questions about it. The second game looked a bit, quite a bit better, at least as far as the attacking and the sacks, the TFLs. That ramped up even more in this third game at a point where if you're on defense, it would be easy to get infinitely frustrated and not have the right mentality. Like, my goodness, the offense keeps turning the ball over. Like, that can't be easy for defensive college athletes or college football players on any side of the ball to continue to focus and do your job when the other side of your equation on your team is putting you in a bad position. So that progress that we've seen from the defense is encouraging. And if you could see anything like that from the offense, and I get that they're at such a low level now to where you're several clicks of the dial away from being good, but you need to see that progress. So at least, it is happening in one facet of this team. But again, if the offense is going to continue to put you behind the 8 ball, that's not going to matter much. And it's only going to get more difficult because, all due respect to Fresno State and the skill players that they have, the teams that ASU has on its schedule upcoming, I mean, you look at the total offense and the scoring leaders in the nation, there are several Pac-12 teams up there. So ASU is going to be facing not just some good conference offenses, but some, at this point, nationally elite offenses. So you hate to see it when you have a football team where you put so much pressure and responsibility on one side of the ball, but that's basically seeming like what ASU has right now, to where it's putting all its hope into the defense to try to make plays, try to limit offenses. But that's a really, really big ask.
Yeah, and so we'll see how up for it this unit really is. I mean, they're going to be without Clayton Smith perhaps for a little bit, but overall it's been really good. They're getting Anthony Cooper back to bolster the interior defensive line. CJ Fight got the start alongside Deshaun Mallory. Mallory was continuing to be a really good welcome addition from Michigan State as well. I think really the only major complaint so far you can really kind of levy at the defense is that they still have not generated a single turnover through 3 weeks of play, and that's really got to change. We'll get to that perhaps in our keys to a massive upset against USC. It's kind of weird that, they're playing as well as they are and being as disruptive behind the line of scrimmage as they are and still not having a single turnover. Dillingham chalked that up to just guys continuing to be finding more comfort within the defensive scheme. And he says that as that comfort comes, having hands and passing lanes and the kind of things that ultimately end up creating some of those turnovers will come. But you would like to see that, be as active and as chaotic as they are, bringing pressures on offenses to get some more turnovers. But overall, I mean, it's really hard to levy too much of a complaint against a defense that has given you 3 straight winning efforts. Not perfect efforts, but still good enough for wins if you have even just a base level of Pac-12 competency on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it's just really mystifying in a sense, because heading into the season, figured, okay, the offense should be decent, should be solid. You've got some receivers, running backs, tight ends, quarterbacks you trust, offensive line issues, but the offense should be fine. The defense, hey, we don't know if ASU is going to get to the quarterback. Struggled mightily against that last year. Don't know if they're going to be able to shut down offenses in other ways. So we're really seeing just opposites of what we thought would be the case. So making sense of it and saying, okay, how good can this defense be? How can they fill in these holes that need to be filled? What is the offense doing? That's why, I mean, it is just such a series of questions that are tremendously difficult to answer right now.
Yeah, so ASU's got to find some answers as Pac-12 play is finally here. The non-con is behind us. Not a great showing by the offense, a promising showing by the defense. A lot of questions, a lot of things that are kind of have happened outside of the control, but this is a game of adjustments. And as Kenny Dillingham has frequently said, especially in recent weeks, nobody cares about your circumstances. Nobody cares if most of your team is playing dinged up or injured or whatnot. You got to ultimately get out there, get some results, trust the process. So he made another metaphor that's kind of in the long-term approach, Joe, about kind of watering the bamboo. You might not see the results, but, a little bit down the road, you might see all of a sudden, it sprout to life a little bit. But whether that's later this season in the midst of a pretty hard schedule or even further down the road in future years, a mixed bag, I would say, to put it charitably, from the Sun Devils through non-conference play.
Yeah, at this point, it's trying to see the long term of it all, knowing that teams can rebuild and reload pretty quickly. And I know that there may be still this antiquated mentality, because it's hard to shake, of, your program is what it is and you just got to recruit through it. And something like this may appear to be a 4 or a 5 year turnaround process, as opposed to maybe 1, 2, or 3 years. We don't know the future, but there are other programs that have improved in short order. I'm the last dude on the planet ever going to give any credit to those folks down in Tucson, but you think about the first season under their head coach that had just 1 win, right? And a close one against a team that barely had any of their personnel. That could have been a winless team. And granted, they're not world beaters, nor do I or anybody listening to this podcast want them to be want that to be the case. But there has been improvement. There have been players, again, just using that as an example, been able to get from the transfer portal through recruiting. You can get people to buy in and believe, and you can make positive traction there. That's something that certainly is possible with Arizona State. So you want to see how the remainder of the season pans out. The logical expectation is that it may get worse before it gets better. Just talking about like this week specifically, but that doesn't necessarily put the future in absolute doubt. I mean, I'm seeing just these scorching hot takes of Kenny Dillingham isn't ready for this or that sort of thing. I mean,
I saw one that he's never going to be successful. Like,
people are just already making their decision,
especially in this day and age of the sport, where that's the least. That's a whole that might be a whole separate episode.
Yeah, because again, that probably ties to unrealistic expectation in the first place, because that's the only way one can reach that conclusion. Let the season pan out. Hope to get this team with healthy personnel at some point, but understand that the position that the previous coaching staff put this program in is not something that can get fixed in 3 games. This is a different state of the union for Sun Devil football. For year in, year out, you could predict that this team would win 6, 7, 8 games, and much more often than not, you'd be right about it. This is just a different thing than any of us have seen, and I've been following this program again for 25, 30 years. You haven't seen consecutive years of major struggles. Even like, Dennis Erickson had a couple consecutive down years, but those are still kind of hovering around the 500 mark. This is just a different thing because of the trauma placed upon this program from the previous head coach and the people that he chose to employ. So patience. I know that it's difficult. I know that it's difficult when you see such horrible execution like was on the field last Saturday. I know that it's difficult when that horrible execution is compounded by things you see elsewhere in this conference. But sometimes you just kind of have to put yourself in a vacuum on the topic, not focus on what's happening elsewhere, not get jealous of what's happening elsewhere, and just focus on the fact of what can be here. And the future still has the ability to be bright. I mean, the fact that we're even having this conversation after 3 games is beyond me. But my encouragement to fans and supporters of this program would be to allow a lot more patience and leniency than some are exhibiting right now.
All right, Sun Devils. Well, you might not be feeling too good after what you saw on the field last Saturday. Great chance to do some retail therapy with our friends at the good brand homefieldapparel.com. Of course, the premium licensed vintage clothing apparel line based out of Indianapolis. Over 150 schools in their collection, including your Arizona State University. 24 amazing designs in that collection. Highly recommend you get it's really, I wear a home field shirt pretty much every day. The most comfortable apparel you will have, and amazing designs. And they're having a couple of really cool drops. If you have some of the Idaho or Idaho State fans in your life, that will be dropping on September 21st at 9 a.m. Eastern time. A lot of really cool designs in those collections. So, of course, there's a big Idaho State flavor on this Sun Devil team. 6 former Bengals there, even including Charlie Regal, ASU's associate head coach and special teams coordinator. And then on the 22nd at 7 a.m., they're doing some cool things this year with their games of the week, where they pick a few games and have schools. They're going to release some new designs that have a matchup. Florida State and Clemson, App State and Wyoming, UCLA at Utah. This should be an interesting Pac-12 game there. And Iowa versus Penn State. Some really cool stuff there. But of course, you want to dial in and grab some of that Sun Devil swag there. And you can do so with a 15% off discount if you use offer code SOTD23. So just make sure you drop that code SOTD23 for 15% off at homefieldapparel.com. Support those good folks. Support the good brand because they have been doing a great job of supporting us this year. And so now, obviously, with the offense kind of in a little bit of disarray and a lot of key guys that are out of the lineup there, some guys have had to step up. So with Jalen Conyers out last week, tight end Bryce Pierre made his first career start and led the team in receiving yards on his 3 receptions. So I had a chance to catch up with him after Tuesday's practice. And after that conversation, you'll hear from true freshman running back Kyson Brown, who led the team in rushing, kind of a situation you perhaps didn't expect going into that game, but he's been very impressive. He had some good contributions on special teams. And now it looks like with DeCarlos Brooks and George Hart being out for a little bit, he has a chance to make his name known in conference play. So here are the conversations, first with Bryce Pierre and then with Kyson Brown. The game result wasn't what you guys wanted, but you had a few receptions on your own, led the team in receptions. What is it like just getting out there and being able to contribute in a way?
It was fun. It was good to go out there, just get more comfortable with the game, what it was for me, being able to catch the ball, feel where the defense is moving, learn how to break tackles more. So it was cool. Obviously, we didn't get the outcome we wanted. It was very frustrating, but all we can do is come back and get better.
How are you guys kind of dealing with that frustration of not being able to put up any points?
Me personally, I'm taking it to everybody on the team and making us go harder every day, trying to hold everybody accountable. And I think everybody's feeling it as well, like offense, doing the extra things, trying to get better every day. So
how does it feel just knowing that you guys are kind of so beat up, a lot of injuries, and obviously can you like to say no one cares about the circumstances, but just still that being such a kind of a major impact to what you guys are trying to do?
It's very unfortunate, obviously, but we got to have that next guy up mindset and be able to go in and try to fill the spot of that next guy and make it look like it's no drop off.
How do you feel that the tight end group collectively did, kind of without Jalen out there?
I think we did fine. We did what we could. We gotta play hard while he's not there. And fill that spot for him. So I think we did pretty good.
What are some of the kind of the big lessons and takeaways when you kind of looked back at the film and some of the things that you're going to try to implement going forward?
Just just stay calm, stay patient. Just dealing with our situation and just to continue to fight. That's all we can do right now with all the injuries and stuff. I don't think the season's over. It's only 3 games. We got a whole 9 games left, so it's a lot of football to play. So,
what do you think the kind of collective mindset is? Coming in 1-2 through the non-con, but still kind of a new opportunity with the conference play ahead.
Obviously, we want to win. I don't think there's not one person on the team who wants to win. It's just how we attack. So,
looking ahead to this Trojan defense, what are some of the things that kind of jump out of film and what they like to do schematically?
They like to roll it. They like to roll their coverage a lot. They bump, so they don't really match in the boundary and stuff. So we have a lot of stuff in the game plan to take advantage of that. So.
Being a Southern California guy, does this game mean a little extra to you?
Oh yeah, it does, 100%. It's a dream. Obviously, as a kid, you watch USC growing up. Now you get to play against them. It's like a idol become a rival kind of thing.
Did you grow up pulling for them, being a Southern California guy?
I was more of a UCLA fan.
You were? Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
But I liked USC as well. I've never had any bad blood with either school. I went to both games. It was always cool to see growing up. So it's fun.
So obviously not the result that you guys wanted to, but overall, what was kind of you feel like kind of maybe the collective mindset of just the team having the offense having to go through kind of such a frustrating night?
I felt like we just like the mindset was keep fighting, don't give up. So that was really the mindset of the guys. I mean, of course, we wasn't having the night that we wanted to have offensively, but that was just kind of the culture right here. Just don't give up.
How have you seen kind of the teammates and coaching staff try to since that frustrating night kind of gear things towards a rebound and kind of putting that behind you and looking ahead to conference play?
It's a lot of guys that been stepping up, a lot of vets that stepping up, being the vocal piece of the team. And, we won't change, so a lot of guys we doing things to make change. And,
What did it feel like for you to get out there? Even though it was kind of a frustrating night overall, but get some run, get some carries, gain some yards. Team's leading rusher.
Yeah, it felt good. It felt good to get some burn out there. I just feel like it was kind of a bad predicament, but because I'm a team player, so it was a good and bad, to get out there, but taking the loss hurts more though.
What is it like just knowing the offense just kind of ravaged by injuries? There's kind of things out of your guys' control in terms of like offensive line, quarterback, and just Kenny says that no one's feeling sorry for you guys, but just still knowing that it is having an impact.
It's having an impact, but we're not going to dwell on it too much. The next man up mentality. So that's where we at this point in the offense. So that's what we preaching. So next man up.
How do you feel that you've kind of performed these first 3 games? Seeing some special teams work, making some good key special teams tackles as well as some of the stuff on offense this last week.
I just feel like I just got to keep getting better. I showed some little spurts of explosiveness. Last game, but I just feel like just keep getting better every day, keep showing what I can do, and just keep proving myself to the world.
Number 5 USC coming to town. Is there any kind of extra juice? As you guys are looking for a rebound, but knowing that you have an opportunity to take down one of the Titans in the game.
Yeah. I'm hyped. We all hyped, so we feel like we could beat anybody, and that's the energy around here. So if you don't got the energy, get from around us, but we coming with it.
What are some of the things that really kind of jump out to you in your preparation for the Trojans? But what this USC team likes to do defensively?
Defensively, they got a lot of strong up front. So we gonna work on moving, making the front line move around. They got some corners that we are trying to expose and just move around in our formations with a lot of motion. So.
What's been the message from Coach Iguano to the group of backs? Obviously, some of the guys are dinged up, but some of the just issues in the offensive line. Just overall, what's been his kind of message throughout these first 3 weeks?
Everybody stay ready, prepare, stay ready, keep your bodies healthy, and it's go time. So
now jump behind enemy lines. Learn about the USC Trojans. You are never an enemy when you walk through the doors of Spaghetti Shack, which, as you know by now, is not just Sun Devil owned and operated, but owned and operated by former Sparky, the Sun Devil. They've got 3 locations, 1 up in the cool temperatures of Pine Top and 2 in Tempe, including the ASU Tempe location, just 1 mile from Mountain America Stadium. That's open from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, and 11 to midnight on Fridays and Saturdays. So go and get your fill of spaghetti, meatball sandwiches, and more. And hey, Mondays, like we always tell you, it's buy one meatball, get one free all day long. Tuesdays, they've got their famous spaghetti tacos. Catering is also available, and like all our sponsors, the Spaghetti Shack is deeply involved in giving back to the Sun Devil community and the Tempe community as a whole. So next time you're looking for some grub, support a Sun Devil small business owned and operated by diehard Sun Devils. That new ASU Tempe location's at 922 East Apache Boulevard, of course, in Tempe. Once again, that's 922 East Apache Boulevard. You can find them on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at The Spaghetti Shack, and on Twitter at spaghetti_shack. Check out their menu, hours, locations, and more online at thespaghettishack.com. The Spaghetti Shack, takeout for the pasta-loving people.
All right, joining us now for this week's Know Your Enemy segment, returning to the show, Ryan Young, the publisher of TrojanSports.com on the Rivals Network. Ryan, thanks for coming back on the show. How are you tonight?
I'm great. Thanks for having me back.
So, of course, this school year is the swan song for the Pac-12 conference. So give us the take from the USC side. What are the overall feelings, one, for this being the final year of their existence in a conference that has brought a lot of good memories for Trojans and Trojan fans? And then also, what's the outlook on moving out to the Big Ten?
I don't sense a lot of sentimentality from USC fans. I think they're ready for the next thing, ready for the next step. And especially they had kind of this reset last year with Lincoln Riley coming in. So he has no ties to any of these Pac-12 rivalries or matchups. And he's going to only have 2 years in the conference. So I think the focus this year is more about maximizing the last year of Caleb Williams, trying to reach the college football playoff while you have a transcendent quarterback, and then excitement for the Big Ten. Maybe there should be more nostalgia, sentimentality attached to it, but I just haven't sensed it this year from either players, coaches, or fans.
Now, looking at this season, coming in, was there a feeling from both maybe the program or even the fan base that this is playoff or bust?
To a certain degree. I mean, you definitely don't feel like this is going to be the last chance. As long as Riley's here, you assume that he'll bring in more top quarterbacks. The roster will keep getting better overall. But you also recognize that Caleb Williams is kind of special, and even Lincoln Riley may not be able to replace Caleb Williams right away or ever. This could be the best quarterback ever plays at USC. And you'd hate to think you had him for 2 years and didn't have the rest of the pieces to truly capitalize on that. So it does have that feeling to a degree, but not in the sense that if it doesn't happen this year, it'll never happen. It's just it would be a shame to waste this special opportunity with this truly generational talent.
Now, speaking of that generational talent, Caleb's even having a better start to this season than he did in his Heisman winning campaign a season ago. When you look at Caleb last year versus 2023, what kind of jumps out to you? Where are you seeing kind of the differences, and where has he elevated his game?
Imperceptible to me, but I'm not a QB guru. And it's been funny. Like, we've asked Riley probably a dozen times going back to the spring, how can Caleb get even better? Can he get even better? And he always says, absolutely he can. The guy's only been a college quarterback for a season and a half. He's not even touching what he can do. He goes, you guys may not see it, but he can get better in so many different ways. But the first part of that quote is true. We can't see it. What we saw last year was a guy playing at pretty much the top level you could ever expect. He's back at that level again. If there are areas where he's advanced, it would take the eye of a QB coach to know this, because he looks like the same guy as last year. And that's a full compliment there.
Zachariah Branch has really become one of the breakout stars of this early part of the 2023 college football season. What makes him just so dangerous, and what are the different ways this staff likes to use him?
So somehow I could not have been higher on Zachariah Branch coming in, and yet he still managed to exceed expectations. I knew he would be this guy eventually. I thought he would even be this guy at some point this year. But to come out in his very first game and score 2 touchdowns, to have 2 special teams touchdowns in his first 3 games, he's doing everything all at once. And it's not a surprise. It's just, man, I mean, you can't really ever expect a true freshman to come in and do that. I covered his recruitment pretty extensively the last couple of years. I saw him play numerous 7-on-7 tournaments, go to camps. He was at all times the best athlete on the field, and it wasn't close. And it was almost like he had become a showman in those events. Like, he knew everyone was watching him. Every camera was watching him. And so he's making one-handed catches and just breaking ankles with elusive moves. And he's transferred a lot of that to the field, which has been really impressive. I think they're still only scratching the surface of what they will use him with offensively. He's still learning the playbook, and they have kind of, it's clear they have a few plays that they know he's really comfortable mastering and that they'll use him in, and those have worked really well. One's kind of like a triple option screen where there's 3 ways the play can go, and then one of them's to kick it out to him, and he scored on that a couple times. But the key is just get him in space. Give him a crevice of space, because it is almost impossible for the first guy to bring him down. And we'll see if teams keep kicking to him the rest of this season. But both of his return touchdowns were electrifying, and if I were a special teams coach, I would not be giving him those chances.
So going back to Williams for a moment, there are quite a few football fans here in the Phoenix area that are keeping their eye on Caleb Williams, wondering if he's going to be the next starting quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
There were some statements a couple weeks ago from his camp about, scenarios in which he may not even declare for the draft, that sort of thing. What kind of weight do you put on those statements for those who are kind of looking at what his next step may be?
None. I think it was all posturing. His I call it Caleb Williams Inc. is very methodical in everything they do. There's a reason for everything that's said and put out there. The narrative's very controlled. I think that they clearly want to send the message that he could make it difficult if he's not drafted by a team that he prefers, or if there's not a trade before the draft to somewhere where he's comfortable with. But ultimately, he's not returning to school. He's not coming back and passing up that guaranteed money. Even in the NIL era, being the number 1 overall pick in the draft is still quite a bit of money you can't match through college endorsement deals, and even when you're the reigning Heisman winner and appearing in every 3rd commercial on Saturdays these days. So I think there's no way that he would hold off on being the number 1 pick and starting his career, but it's definitely posturing. It's definitely sending a message, and we'll just see if it has any ramifications. I mean, we've seen it in the past where it has worked with Eli Manning and his camp, and they kind of dictated terms there a little bit. And I think it's more along those lines, but not a true threat of, okay, well, then never mind, I'll come back to LA for another year.
So talking about the offense as a whole through these first 3 games, quite a bit of balance, a 3-headed rushing attack, in addition to what Williams does on the ground. 6 players between 8 and 10 receptions. Is that by design, or is this mainly a product of just blowout games where everybody gets a piece of the pie because USC is just up by so many points?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm very curious to see over the next few weeks what the answer is. I think a lot of it is a product of the opponents. And, Caleb's barely played much in the second halves. They have a really talented freshman class. I think it sends a great message to future recruits that, hey, we'll play you right away. And they had a prime opportunity to pretty much play all their freshmen in these first few games and send that message, like, if you come in here, we'll get you on the field. But as the competition ratchets up, I think the rotation tightens a little bit, and we'll see guys like Dorian Singer and Brendan Rice emerge a little bit more as more consistent target options. Taj Washington, Mario Williams. I think there will be a closer top 5, and I put Zachariah Branch in there. I think we'll see it shrink from like 8 to 9 to maybe 4 to 5 as things go along. But I haven't taken the time to scrutinize every roster in the country, but I would be stunned if there was a deeper receiver core anywhere. I feel pretty confident making that claim. And this is for a team that even lost Jordan Addison, a first-round draft pick from last year's team. I don't know if they have a true one-for-one replacement for him, like a true just this guy has to be the number 1 target. But the depth of talent overall, I mean, all those guys who have played so far have a strong case for playing. But I don't know if you can keep giving Dorian Singer 2 targets a game and Brendan Rice 2 targets a game. Eventually, those guys have to get a little bit more of the share.
So there are quite a few players on this Trojan roster from the Phoenix area, some like Eric Gentry, Eddie Chaplitsky. They've got the ASU ties. One Phoenix resident is a tight end by the name of Deuce Robinson, one of those freshmen that you were referring to that's gotten some time here. He's impressed early. What have you seen from him? What has he brought to the field early in his USC career?
And he's the one guy that I'm not sure what happens moving forward. If his role was more dictated by the opponent early on, or if he will truly get steady targets. What he has going for him is that they don't have anyone else like him physically. They don't have another guy with his size and height. And if you look at the advanced stats, they haven't thrown many contested targets to anyone this year, but he's had 5 like kind of jump ball opportunities and caught 3 of them. And he's the only guy. Rice can, other guys can, but he's the only guy that has a true physical advantage. in those matchups. So he is a unique weapon for them in that way. I think that will keep him involved. We'll just see what kind of volume he gets. But he's another guy that's been more advanced than I thought. I went to see him play last year during his high school season, and you obviously see the talent, you see the upside. I thought he might come in a little bit more raw and need more time to truly settle into college, but he's looked good when he's gotten chances. Now, a lot of those have been in the second half of these games, so we'll see how much that continues on. But the talent's there, and what he brings physically is unique to that receiving core.
Obviously, just so many weapons with this Trojan offense. What do you think a defense can do from a game plan perspective to maybe just kind of slow them down a little bit?
I think the only question that still remains for this offense is the offensive line, and they haven't truly been tested yet. And there was enough uncertainty early on that through the first 2 games, they were rotating the guard spots pretty heavily, still trying to find the right 5. So I take from that there are some definite questions about, is this line as good as last year's was? And so the only way I see to slow this offense down is to truly get pressure on Caleb, tackles for loss in the run game, and kind of just disrupt them and get them off schedule. Because if he has time to operate and if he has time to do what Riley's drawing up, I don't know that there is a way to slow them down. So I think you have to do it behind the line of scrimmage. The challenge there is that Caleb Williams is also maybe the most elusive quarterback in the pocket. It just has like the sixth sense for sensing pressure around him and spinning and dancing and buying time getting away from it. So that makes it extra hard. But the only way I can see a defense slowing this offense down is by causing disruption before the play unfolds.
Defensive coordinator Alex Grinch was under a bit of fire last year for the defense's kind of overall performance, maybe late in the year. Ultimately came back on staff. How much progress, if any, do you feel that the defense has made so far this season?
It's really the storyline of the season, and the fans have certainly not bought in just yet. I mean, all the angst and consternation about Grinch still remains within the fan base, even though they played pretty well the last 2 weeks. What I see is tangible reasons for optimism that are very specific. They're so much deeper than they were last year, and that was a very noticeable problem down the stretch last season where they would lose key guys and placements were clearly at a different level, a lower level of productivity and contribution. And Alex Grinch even said it last season. He goes, ideally, you want practice to matter. You want to say you're competing for your job every week. But the reality was at many spots, there was no viable, like even match to bench a guy for someone else because it would have been too big of a drop off. So they finally have the depth at pretty much every level of the defense now. And where you see it the most is in the interior defensive line with Bear Alexander, the Georgia 5-star transfer, and Keon Bars, of course, coming from Arizona. Those guys have just elevated the interior of the defensive front so much from where it was last year. They didn't have anyone like that, and they didn't have any depth there. And that was one of their biggest weaknesses. It's become a strength. Alexander in particular has been a wrecking ball all 3 weeks. His basic stats don't show it, but his pressure numbers are way up there. He has 12 pressures through 3 games, which is tops on the team. And he's just constantly disrupting plays, getting quarterbacks off schedule, allowing the defensive ends and Russians to make plays based on what he's started. So that's the biggest difference. The linebacker play is better, but I can't tell you right now the overall defense is better. I can't until they play some better offenses. And that's going to be maybe a couple more weeks down the line, unless Arizona State's quarterback situation turns out more promising than it's being made out to be this week. But there's reason for optimism, but certainly no one is buying in just yet. It'll take until the midpoint of the season to say, okay, there's true differences here. This is truly a better unit.
Yeah, definitely. ASU's quarterbacks, the position overall is still kind of beat up a little bit. Injuries all across the offense. So, yeah, when you look at what kind of game plan Alex Grinch might roll out there against an offense that is really coming off of a shutout and really having some season-long struggles, what kind of game plan are you expecting from this Trojan defense on Saturday?
I'd expect a lot of pressure. I think they're going to be very aggressive. I think they feel very good about what they have across that front, whether it be the pressure they get from Alexander and Bars inside, or guys like Jamil Muhammad and Solomon Byrd and Anthony Lucas on the outside. They've used nickel Jalen Smith very aggressively on blitzes so far, bringing him to the line of scrimmage and letting him rush the quarterback. So I think they're going to start there by being very aggressive and trying to make the QB uncomfortable and going from there. It also helps their one, I think, weakness that's been apparent so far is the cornerbacks, the secondary. They have talent there, but it's mostly young and unproven, and they've gotten beat for some big plays. So I think it would be to their advantage to not give a quarterback a lot of time to work and take shots downfield. They want to try and get him off his mark.
So obviously Caleb Williams is a national name, and guys like Dorian Singer or even Keon Bars, are known within the Pac-12 footprint. Who's a guy or two on each side of the ball, maybe a little bit under the radar, at least in terms of perhaps outside perception, those X factor type players for the Trojans that you think will play a big role on Saturday and also the season to come?
Defensively, I'll say Solomon Byrd. He was a transfer from Wyoming who came over last year, and what was their best pass rusher through like the first 3 weeks of the season, and then just totally faded down the stretch. And we don't get a lot of injury clarity, so I don't know if he was hurt or if there are other factors. And coming into this year, they had brought in so many transfers that no one was talking about Solomon Byrd. And sure enough, through 3 games, he leads the team in tackles for loss and sacks. Grinch called him the MVP so far. I would give it to Bear, but he gave it to Byrd. So that's a guy that really hasn't gotten a lot of buzz, but has played very well so far and kind of seems like a man on a mission. Offensively, under the radar, he shouldn't be, but I myself continue to underrate him every year. Taj Washington. So Taj Washington was on the roster when Riley came in. They immediately bring in 4 receiver transfers, and I'm just assuming that means that Taj Washington is the odd man out. He ends up being their second leading receiver last year. Here again, they bring in Dorian Singer and the 5-star Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson. They have all this talent, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't see how Taj Washington fits in, and he's been their best receiver so far. So he's not the biggest name. He wasn't a 5-star, 4-star coming out of high school. He transferred from Memphis, but he just consistently makes big plays and has been playing the best he's played in his USC career so far this fall.
So, of course, USC has very legitimate playoff aspirations this season, and for all that Lincoln Riley's done, his critics will say that he can get to those really big games, but has issues in that space there, as we saw at the very tail end of last year for USC, and some examples when he was at Oklahoma. What do you think it's going to take for this year to be different, not only to get to the Pac-12 championship game or to get even into the playoff or high caliber bowl game, but to be successful there and achieve the goals that USC has for the season?
It all hinges on that defense. And if people were looking at it realistically last year, they overachieved because the talent just wasn't there defensively. If you had scrutinized it at the start of the year or the midway point or any point and said, how are they winning with this thin of a defense? And you go position by position and go, they've got 2 linebackers they can use, and both those guys were hurt for a stretch. They have 1 proven cornerback. They have no interior defensive line. They have 1 dominant pass rusher, but not much depth. And so the reality was they shouldn't have even been as good as they were last year. And the fade late as they did should have been no surprise. Is this defense truly better? That remains the question that we can't answer yet. But they've been optimistic since the winter, since the annual transfer portal pillaging season, that they had the talent at least to compete this year, the talent and depth. And that can make all the difference. Because, again, with Caleb Williams, with this offense, they don't need a top 10 defense. They just need to not have a number 105 defense. They need to be kind of a top 50-ish, maybe a little bit better, and just get a few extra stops than they were getting last year and not totally wilt down the stretch. And that's really all that's missing, because I would be surprised if this offense finished less than 3rd nationally in yards and points, and I think it could end up as the number 1 overall offense. So when you have that, you just need a little bit more help on the defensive side, and there's reason to believe it's there, but it's too soon to say with certainty.
Well, Ryan, as always, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insight into the Trojans, and encourage our listeners to head over to trojansports.com leading up to the game. Get to know ASU's opponent on Saturday. Ryan, thanks again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So, Brad, we are technically switching seasons here in a few days. I know that for a very particular reason, but the season of autumn will be upon us. And when the seasons change, although it really doesn't do much here in Arizona for the time being, it's good time to maybe change up your wardrobe. How about doing so at Cactus Sports, located at 514 South Mill Avenue in Tempe? You can put together the perfect Sun Devil fit from head to toe in one stop with the best ASU merchandise around at Cactus Sports. Now, at Cactus Sports, they are as passionate about making sure you look your Sun Devil best as they are about supporting the maroon and gold on game day. Now, if you can't make it to that Mill Avenue location, you can start to put together your ultimate Sun Devil gear wish list online at cactussports.com. Go ahead and stock up. They offer free domestic ground shipping on orders over $75. You can follow them on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Cactus Sports AZ. Cactus Sports, ASU alumni, owned since 1992. Think local, buy local, be local. Now we get the pleasurable experience of talking about the USC Trojans. Usually I do a great deal of research for these sort of previews. Didn't feel the need to go into that level of depth here this week because, you know what, maybe you folks just kind of want to hear the high level stuff because it's been a little bit of group therapy here. I appreciate all of you who are tuning in. I know that, games like what we saw last Saturday sometimes force folks to just kind of run away from everything. But talking about these Trojans and who knows, you think it's not the last time that ASU will play USC in football, but there just isn't a future time that's on deck after this.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of the ongoing debate of the last few years, but a lot of people feel that like USC's kind of been that number 2 Pac-12 rival, and now with to ASU, and now with everybody kind of going their separate ways after this last hurrah of the conference. It's gonna be. I mean, last year covering the game in LA, it was kind of hit me as I'm walking out. Like, it's been the last time I leave the Coliseum. I mean, it's a lot of history. I mean, I guess in recent decades, it's not been an ASU's favorite, but it started off pretty well. But the Jail Mary, the Lane Kiffin getting tarmacked. It's just there have been some good moments in this series, and it's kind of a little sad that we don't know if we might ever see him again.
In my time following ASU, the wins against USC have generally been kind of few and far between, but many of them, heck, almost all of them, have been incredibly memorable. I mean, you think back to the 96 game with the multiple overtimes in that first year of that overtime format. And then after several years of losses, a very cathartic victory in 2011 in what may have been the first Maroon Monsoon, if I'm not mistaken.
First Maroon Monsoon, yeah. And then Cam Marshall opened it up with a 70-yard touchdown run.
You've got the legendary picture of Vontez Burfict pointing at Matt Barkley, and then you move on. You talked about the Jail Mary. You've got the tarmac experience. You've got the N'Keal Harry game where he had that acrobatic catch, the punt return for a touchdown. Some other victories around those as well. So it is something that. Again, in the kind of the formative years of me as a college football fan were when USC was just on another level under Pete Carroll. So, I mean, that was an evil empire playing out here on the West Coast. And it just seemed like it was so dang difficult to beat that team. So anytime a victory happened, it was a real big deal. Now, USC had some downtimes a couple years ago, but then made a splash hire in Lincoln Riley coming over from Oklahoma and dang near just righted all the wrongs on their side almost in just one season. They were 11-3 last year, and 2 of those losses came at the very tail end of the Pac-12 championship game, then in their bowl game against Tulane. So they were 11-1 in the regular season last year. Of course, the headliner for them, Caleb Williams, the defending and reigning Heisman Trophy winner, trying to do as many have tried to do before him and become the only multiple time Heisman winner since Archie Griffin of Ohio State in the mid-1970s. He certainly has a shot, and after these first 3 games, he is keeping himself in that contention. USC is 3-0, ranked 5th in the AP poll. They have scored at least 56 points in all 3 games they've played. Trojans lead the nation in scoring offense, rank 3rd in total offense. Their average margin of victory is 42 points per game. Once again, that's not the amount of points per game they score, which would be pretty nice. Heck, I'd take about half that at this point. But they're beating teams by an average of 42 points per game. And if that is not enough to make you a little worried for this weekend, they're rested and recovered, fresh off a bye week. Largely, I'd say, because they played that week 0 game. So this is a fresh and rejuvenated Trojan team that offensively has just been tearing the house down. And defensively, which was the major question mark about them last year, there have been improvements. So this is a team that, as good as they were last year, they look better this year.
So does Caleb Williams. I mean, so this is a stat I ran across today. Now, he's already trending ahead after 3 games better than he did last season when he hoisted the Heisman at the end of the year. He has 12 touchdowns, no picks. He's completing nearly 79% of his throws through 3 games. That's great. He's only played 8 quarters in those 3 games, and he's putting up those kind of numbers. Like a lot of and we'll get into the kind of the other stars on their offense. There's a lot of rotation because they've not had to play full games because they are just beating the living hell out of a lot of these teams. Now, there's been some games they started a little slow in San Jose State and kind of kept the Spartans came kind of kept things a little interesting in the first half, but this is like full like Death Star mode. They are playing pretty well. Maybe there's a little rust factor after a week off. Who knows? I mean, this is a team that at one point held the record for the largest point spread upset. When Stanford, they were at like 41-point favor or underdogs, beat USC in those prime years.
It was something wild, yeah.
And so heading into this week, ASU is a 33.5-point home underdog. But I just don't know that we'll see any kind of upset like that because Caleb. I mean, you just go back to the ASU game matchup a year ago. How many times ASU's pass rush? And that was a year where ASU's pass rush was bad. But they seemingly had Caleb corralled numerous times throughout that night game. And man, he is just an absolute magician. But the only thing that landed on him during that entire game was like when Nesta scored him with water near the sideline, because this guy is good. He's enjoy him. He's gonna, I don't know if he's gonna end up. I mean, he's gonna be the number 1 pick. So if he ends up maybe here in the Valley despite some protests or whatever, but man, this offense is just like at ridiculous levels at the quarter mark of this season.
I mean, it's just like Matt Leinart, the other or more recent quarterback Heisman Trophy winning player from USC, ended up playing for the Cardinals. Didn't go that great. I'm sure Cardinals fans want if Caleb Williams were to end up out here, that they maybe want things to be better.
As our guy, Mr. MVP likes to say, stay out of Scottsdale.
Yeah. That's a good idea for a multitude of reasons. And as you just heard, from the USC insider, as profoundly effective as this Trojan offense has been, they're still just kind of sorting things out as far as figuring out the roles in the pecking order. On the ground, you've got 3 guys that have between 14 and 25 carries at running back, in addition to what Caleb Williams has been doing. So a lot of just split carries there, things that you usually see in early season blowouts. You're not necessarily putting too much of a workload on any one guy because you don't really need to. You heard about Taj Washington, 9 catches, 233 yards, and 3 touchdowns so far. We talked about Deuce Robinson, the talented tight end out of Pinnacle High School from the Phoenix area. Brendan Rice, another Arizona native. Dorian Singer, yet another Arizona native, I believe, from Pinnacle also. Although, weirdly, I'm sure a lot of ASU fans are not too peeved that he is on the USC roster, given the school that he left to go to USC. So
USC went shopping in Tucson this offseason.
That they did. They've been doing a little. The last 2 off seasons, they have done quite a few acquisitions in the state of Arizona. USC, give them credit, the best team money can buy. And then you have others, Mario Williams, Zachariah Branch, as we talked about, a phenomenal freshman. So just a ton of players that have touched the ball on offense. So we'll see how this shakes out as things maybe get more competitive in terms of the games they play. But maybe you're just seeing this whole turnstile deal all season because they can do whatever they want to do. I mean, this offense has not been slowed down yet this year, even in that opening game, allowing, I believe, 28 points, still was a blowout. When you're putting up 50 plus with regularity, that trend will probably die down. But I mean, the weapons that Caleb Williams has at his disposal are just about second to none, and that's a scary thing for ASU and every other team USC is going to play this year.
Yeah, I mean, whether they're running the ball, all 3 of the backs that have kind of seen the most carries so far. Austin Jones, the former Stanford tailback, he's been kind of their number 1. He's their starter, but he hasn't had to help play a whole lot. Marshawn Lloyd from South Carolina, the transfer, as well. All the backs are, they're averaging all over 7.5 yards per carry. Then you add in the ridiculously loaded weapons in the pass game, whether it is the local guy like Deuce Robinson or Singer, who was brought over to be their kind of the Jordan Addison replacement. But Zachariah Branch is just so exciting to play or to watch play, whether it's on offense or special teams. You heard Ryan Young talk about just if there's one Achilles heel, it's maybe they're still sorting things out on the offensive line. And that might be the only prayer, is like if you get the pass rush going, if Brian Ward can dial up something, reach deep into that bag of tricks and find something to get going and kind of disrupt Caleb Williams. And if he's not able to, pull off that magic disappearing act like he usually does when the pass rush gets near him, maybe you can force a few turnovers. But this is, one of those offenses that is in such a groove, that is so loaded with talent, that it's not, how do you stop them from scoring? It's just like, what can you do to kind of limit the damage that's inbound?
I mean, just to put some numbers on it, USC averages over 59 points per game. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever said in my life. And also averaging over 580 yards of total offense with 25 offensive touchdowns in just 3 games. And as you talked about, it's not like they're going full throttle in every quarter of all those games. I mean, realistically, things could be worse. So that, I mean, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to suggest. I don't know. I mean, because ASU's defense, yes, they've been playing much better. In a game like this, there's already a tremendous amount of pressure on the defense to perform just because of the caliber of the opponent, spearheaded by the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. But that is still such a tall order for any defense. And a guy like Caleb Williams, I mean, he can hurt you in so many ways. I mean, he's got like that Patrick Mahomes quality about him, to where plays can seem absolutely dead to rights for a double-digit loss of yardage, and then he just works his magic, eludes things, and slings it for, a 40-yard completion or a touchdown, or scoots out for a first down, or whatever the case may be. So this offense, if it's not the best in college football, I'm not sure what is. And that should probably prove true over the course of the entire season. So, once again, a major task for the Sun Devil defense. Even though the defense has been inspiring, it's still just a lot to ask of them to try to even contain this USC offense. I mean, you saw a little bit last year in the Coliseum for ASU. I mean, they were competitive in that first half, forced the first interception by Williams of last year. Maybe you can repeat some of that, but again, this is not just some simple logic of, if you do A, B, and C, you'll be in good shape. I mean, you got to go through the whole alphabet, maybe the Greek alphabet. I don't know, sign language too. Those are letters. I'm just trying to think. You got to go through a lot of steps to try to be effective against this offense.
Yeah, it's again just about limiting the damage, and maybe try to keep them in the 30s. That might be like, this has got to be where ASU's got to ramp up in the turnover department. We'll get to that in the keys of the game. But going through 3 games without generating turnover, not going to get it done. I mean, I think you need multiple. Like, you got to be like +3 type of situations, and also have to be having an offense that can keep Caleb off the field. They're just really good, and this is a real pretty what we've seen, a pretty good ASU defense. Maybe a chance to develop and continue to get better over the course of the season. And they could put forth a pretty good effort and still give up 30-40 points against this offense. They're just that good. But it's a tall task, and kind of after what they've had to endure and kind of shouldering the load for the Sun Devil team, with the lack of an offensive complement, now facing this offensive juggernaut. I mean, things there's light on at the end of the tunnel with Cal coming up, but oh boy, it's gonna be a interesting ride and rough ride to get there.
So switching over to the Trojan defense, and it's just like you heard. I mean, with this offense, as long as the defense is pedestrian, and we heard top 50, I'll agree with that. I mean, it could be like a top 75, 80, anything under 100, and I think this team is still going to win a ton of games. But they are showing improvements from last year, and that was the main question mark, was how prepared are they to be a top-notch defense, and that showed some weaknesses last season through these 3 games, allowing 17 points per game, 368 yards of total offense allowed per game. So they're outgaining opponents by more than 200 yards per game. The defense has 8 sacks on the season, so you're seeing some upward trends for the Trojan defense. And like I said, this does not have to be what was it, the Crunch Bunch, or what was the nickname? I forget whatever the nickname was for the defensive line for the Trojans. I don't even know if was that an ASU. I've been in a daze after what I saw at Mountain America Stadium a couple days ago. So if I'm calling things the wrong things, we're just gonna power through it this week. But to sum it up, the defense is better and still doesn't even need to be that good for them to win a lot of games.
Yeah, we saw last year kind of in those big games, those matchups against Utah. Just the back end was a pretty glaring vulnerability. But with this Alex Grinch defense, I mean, he came back, he was under fire. I kind of surprised they brought him back just because it's USC, you could get a marquee name. But Lincoln Riley brought Alex Grinch back to be his DC, and they're running that 4-2-5 base. But there's a lot of rotation. They got a lot of, not surprisingly, but very talented players. Like Eric Gentry has just 4 tackles in 3 games. I mean, he was one of the stalwarts a season ago. But Solomon Bird's been a very disruptive force off the edge. You heard our insider Ryan Young talk about how Bear Alexander, Keon Bars have been really good in the middle of that defensive line for them. Shane Lee's been really good at linebacker, but I think that secondary, though, especially at corner, is something that ASU potentially could have some success when we obviously have one of the best receivers in the conference in Elijah Badger. Xavier Guillory has had some ups and downs, but he's extremely talented. And you get Jalen Conyers back. Bryce Pierre now is kind of in the flow a little bit of the offense. You have potentially some mismatches in the seams there, kind of in that 4-2-5 scheme. If those guys can get going, if the offensive line can hold up against what has been a pretty aggressive Trojan defense in terms of bringing pressure, they can give whoever the quarterback is some time. There might be some matchups that they can win on the outside and along the seams that could keep ASU around for a little bit.
You mentioned Gentry, fairly limited effort so far, and for those Sun Devils scoring at home for the former Sun Devils with the Trojans, Eddie Chaplitsky at punter, averaging a little over 42 yards on 9 punts. That actually seems like a pretty high. I wouldn't have thought that they're punting 3 times a game. So, decent stuff there for those departed Sun Devils, though, as you mentioned, Gentry in a limited role so far. Now, before we dive into our keys for the game, and just as a spoiler alert for that, I'm going to add some levity to the situation with my keys. We're going to have a little fun. But you know where you always have fun? On devilsdigest.com. Become a member of the huddle there. Get involved in the conversations. Rain or shine, they will be there. So if you've got hot takes that you'd like to blaze into the world, go for it. If you've got positive things that you'd like to say and encourage the fellow members of the Sun Devil fan base, that's good too. You can do it all at devilsdigest.com. Of course, a subscription to Devil's Digest gets you access to premium content across the rivals.com network. You get very in-depth coverage about practices and all other things going on with the football program. Before too long, basketball will be here. You get a ton of coverage on that, as well as baseball and all the important news going on in Sun Devil country. So if you are a true Sun Devil, even in grim times, you got to be a member of devilsdigest.com.
All right, Joe, time for our 3 keys. You mentioned yours would be on the little lighter side, so I'll kind of breeze through mine here in terms of.
We can still go back and forth. Get some dramatic, I need some dramatic pauses and things like that. I'm with it.
So, if ASU's got a chance to kind of engineer what would be one of the bigger upsets in recent school history, number one, you got to steal possessions. You got to steal a number of possessions. I think the magic number is at minimum 3. So be +3 in the turnover margin. Obviously, don't turn the ball over yourself 8 times. Don't turn over at all, but get 3. Your defense hasn't been able to snatch one away. You need to keep Caleb off the field any way possible. So whether it's picking him off, which seems unlikely, or generating some pressures, forcing some other guys in mistakes and jarring the ball loose, you got to be, I think, at least +3 on the turnover margin.
My first key is if the state of California implements a travel ban for the next few games, preventing anyone from the USC team to be able to leave Los Angeles and come to the state of Arizona. I feel fairly confident that if no one from the USC program steps foot into Mountain America Stadium, then ASU has a fairly decent chance to win a game under those circumstances.
All right, we'll see if the federal legislation can pass in time. Number 2. Offensively, ASU needs obviously to be a lot better and across the board, but I think you need to be able to maintain and sustain drives, convert those third downs, because the best way to keep Caleb Williams from scorching you is to make sure he's not even on the field. Put together some long drives, shorten the game as much as you can, win that time of possession battle. It might be anti his character for Kenny Dillingham to kind of go a little, slow things down a little bit. But he's also kind of got a keen mind for football in terms of just doing what he has to do and adjusting his game plan to fit what he's got at his disposal and what he's facing across the field. So I think ASU just got to kind of slow things down, make this a limit the number of possessions for both teams, kind of maybe Service Academy style.
So if the travel restrictions fail and USC happens to make the trip to Arizona, the next key for me is for there to be extreme cases of food poisoning that prevents every single coach and player from seeing the field. I'm talking extreme. I'm talking about flooding from the penthouse and the basement at the same time, if you know what I mean. I figure and I'm talking about every player on the team, fifth stringers, walk-ons, that sort of thing. We want to get to the point where there is just so much food poisoning going on that the people from the band have to play. I think after decades of incessantly hearing the USC fight song in what is the last game of this series being played for the foreseeable future, fans might like to see members of the band suiting up and possibly taking some hits from the Sun Devils. So that's my second key. Outbreak. I'm not wishing injury or permanent harm on anybody. Just a few hours of absolute hell that prevent everybody involved in the program from participating in this game.
Just kind of find that pizzeria from the Jordan flu game in Salt Lake, right? Or something.
There you go.
There you go. All right. Final key. Just unleash hell with the pass rush. Do whatever you can. Whatever Brian Ward's got in his bag of tricks, just unload, because that's pretty much the only thing. You got to get back there, make some plays. They showed some flashes that they're getting around kind of into form. BJ Green obviously is very talented. Prince Dorbaz leading this team in sacks, getting some reinforcements on the interior of the defensive line. 3.5 of the 6 sacks from a week ago came from defensive backs. So they can bring some heat from all angles, all levels. Get crazy, get wild, and see what happens.
If the first 2 keys happen to somehow fail, if USC travels, if they duck that food poisoning bug, then the fail-safe contingency plan is for the NCAA to require all USC offensive, defensive, and special teams players to play the game with their helmets backward. Also, as part of this rule, Caleb Williams has to tie his shoelaces together, cannot lift either arm above his head for the entire game while also wearing a backward helmet. I feel like that's only fair. And so, again, if those first 2 keys I outlined somehow don't happen, this is the one that ASU can sink their teeth into.
All right. So let's dive into our predictions. You can probably surmise that it's not too favorable for the Sun Devils. I do think the offense gets going a little bit in terms of having a new play caller, and having some reinforcements in terms of the personnel get back there. But I just think that it's going to take some time to get that offense kind of, finding a groove where it can, be a unit that can score, 20 plus. Flip side, I think ASU's defense is good. It's just a solid group and it's coming together, but they're going up against the Death Star. And so I think, this is going to be a game with some flashes, but ultimately it's going to play out kind of exactly the way you think it is. I do think ASU covers 41-13 Trojans.
In some capacities, yeah, this could be a great game to try to get off the shelf of that miserable experience and come out, shock the world, and set things right. That just doesn't sound very logical. I know that college sports, college football, not always the most logical things in the world, but still seems like a far reach. A big concern I have many concerns about this game. You're playing one of the best teams in college football with the best player in college football. He earned that title by being the Heisman Trophy winner last year, Caleb Williams. The way that he plays and the way that things are going for ASU, I have significant concern that this is where the defense will get very frustrated and there could be some cracks in the foundation. Frustrated for no fewer than 2 reasons. Number one, if the offense doesn't do their part, which we just haven't seen. So until it does, you need that to be proven. Even if that happens, the second avenue for severe frustration is just in trying to bring down and defend Caleb Williams. You can have every player on the defense at arm's reach from him. and he can still find ways to make plays. He is a tremendously special generational talent that you see so infrequently. That the Patrick Mahomes, and he's a once in a lifetime player in his own right, is really the only comparison that you can make. Beyond that, it's hard to think of any athletes that are similar in nature to what Caleb Williams does. These are just teams that are going in very different directions right now. And again, with all of the offensive concerns and with all of the injury issues and the performance issues and not knowing how things will shake out as far as, okay, the role that Kenny Dillingham will have play calling wise moving forward, it just makes it seem like it's more likely that this game is going to be a continuation of frustration as opposed to an opportunity to get back in a positive direction, even if that happens in defeat. So my prediction is not a pretty one. I'm calling a 52-7 USC victory.
All right, so that's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank our guest, Ryan Young of Trojansports.com, Bryce Pierre, ASU's tight end, and running back Kyson Brown. This game will be kicking off on Fox, so it's a national TV audience, Joe, that gets to see this game, and we'll be kicking off, or starting at 7:40 is the official kickoff time. Really, the broadcast will say 7:30. The in-stadium kickoff will take place around 7:40. Make sure you stay with us on the social media side of things, and also catch us on Arizona's Family Sports Network Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. with a re-air on game day Saturdays at 10 a.m. On social media, you can follow the show on Twitter at SOTD Podcasts, on Instagram at Speak of the Devils. We're on YouTube and Facebook as well. Give me a follow and all the social stuff. B Denny 29.
And you can catch me at Joe Healy 42. A huge thank you to all of our sponsors, the ones, of course, we've mentioned throughout the show, in addition to our longtime sponsor, Sun Devil Family Charities, a 501c3 nonprofit organization created primarily for the purpose of raising funds to provide financial assistance to Arizona State University alumni, students, staff, and immediate family members adversely affected by medical issues. Monetary donations are always appreciated and support those in need due to unexpected medical conditions. Sun Devil Family Charities also has volunteer and sponsorship opportunities available that you can learn about on their website. But most importantly, most urgently, for all of you cornhole enthusiasts or supporters of Sun Devil Athletics or folks that like to have a beer and hang out outside, I think everyone listening should fall under at least one of those categories, if not multiple of them. If I got your attention, Saturday, October the 14th, it's ASU's bye week, so there's no football game to compete with this event. Sun Devil Family Charities presents its Fall Fling at the Mile, a fundraiser cornhole tournament at 100 Mile Brewing Company near Scottsdale Road and the 202. All buy-ins for the event get a couple food and drink tickets, so there's some enjoyment right there. And the winning team of the competitive division takes home $700, while all proceeds, of course, benefit Sun Devil Family Charities. You've seen in the past, I know pre-COVID, they had their Cornhole Bowl, which was always an awesome event every year. They're getting back into the swing of things. They've been doing some cornhole events here and there over the last couple of years, but this is a big deal, and we'd love to support Sun Devil Family Charities however we can and encourage you to do the same. So to register for the Fall Fling at the Mile and to learn more about Sun Devil Family Charities and other ways you can support them, check them out online at sundevilfamily.org, and be sure to follow them on Instagram at sundevilfam and on Twitter at sundevil_family.
Once you're done supporting our amazing sponsors, make sure to drop us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. Joe and I will be back next week as we recap ASU's battle with the Trojans and look ahead to the first road trip heading up to the Bay Area to face Cal.